Good afternoon, everybody. I apologise if I don't look at you much when I'm reading. I just need to read from what I've written. My life before Facial Palsy UK existed was quite different to the life as it is now for me in many ways. I was born with facial palsy with unknown cause. No one really knew much about facial palsy when I was born, and my GP was none the wiser about what could be done. All my mum was told was that I had Bell's palsy. It was only when my mum saw a programme on the TV about someone with facial palsy that she went to the doctors and told him, "You are referring her there." I was there from the age of 6 until I was 19. During this time I was operated on many times. It wasn't until much later in life that I realised that this was my happy place. I still remember my hospital number, the nurses that were there time after time, even the play leaders' names, and that I couldn't wait to be a teenager so I could get into the teenagers' room. When I reached the age I was allowed in, it was closed, so I had to wait even longer, and when I got there, it really wasn't worth the wait. My mum used to travel up on the workman's coach and be there from the moment I woke up until the moment I fell asleep. Never once did she leave me. It wasn't until I was older that my brother and sister told me that they resented me for this, and it was because they were left with people and I had all my mum's attention. The reason this was my happy place was because I fitted in. I think this is why I continually agreed to have operations. I only remember one occasion where I saw a psychologist, and that was with my mum. The only thing that bothered me was having photos taken, and that there was a teacher at the hospital when you had to do schoolwork. I was happy and my school grades were good considering the amount of schooling I had missed. I wasn't fazed by anything, and my mum was told I was doing great. I remember being bullied at my first primary school, and I was telling my mum. She would go up to the school every time, but the head teacher used to say, "I don't know what you want me to do. How do you want me to handle it?" This made things worse, but not only for me, but for my brother who was at the same school. So I stopped saying anything. The bullying didn't stop, I just kept it to myself. Changing primary schools was a new start when we moved house. My mum took me to the school and was sat with the head teacher, who asked what he could do to help me settle in easier. I remember there being an assembly and being introduced to the school, and the other children being told I had Bell's palsy and I looked different. This made me feel more vulnerable. Because I was off for long periods of time, I didn't really have any close friends at school. I remember being in the playground on my own a lot, because I wasn't very confident and I didn't know how to join in with other people, and I didn't want to ask if I could play with them. Secondary school was okay. There were a couple of bullies, but I got used to it. Anything negative that was ever said, I accepted what they were saying, believing everything they said was true. If anyone said anything nice, I never believed them. I had no confidence and I never stood up for myself or let my feelings be known. I did have friends in school, but I never once had a best friend. At that age, you become even more aware of your appearance, and I hated mine with passion. I kept my feelings about my facial palsy to myself. I don't think I really spoke about it much. If anything, it was just about what surgery I was having. At the age of 19, I left the hospital. It had changed a lot by this time. The ward was knocked down and there was a new one in its place, with a new name. Nurses I'd known the whole time were no longer there. Mentally and physically, I was drained. It was no longer my happy place. Everything had changed and I couldn't cope with so many different changes all at once. Nothing was familiar. When I became pregnant with my son, I worried so much I got myself into a right state. The fear of, would my baby be born with this? What would he think of me? What would he think of his face? Panic. I felt like I needed more surgery to make things better. I even tried a faith healer. My son was born and the doctor was great, checking him all over, and he was perfect. I tried another surgeon as I wanted to do something before my son started school, as I didn't want him picked on because of me. When I went to visit them, they didn't look me in the eye when they were talking to me, and I remember them saying, "What do you expect me to do? Don't you realise you had 5-star treatment?" He agreed to operate, but I couldn't go through with it. I didn't have a connection, and there was no trust. and he totally dismissed my feelings. This just made me feel guilty for the way I felt even more. My son was bullied at school because of my situation. I asked the teacher to speak to his class, but they didn't see a problem and said it's just kids being kids. I felt so guilty and thought I was a bad mum. Sorry. All because of my facial palsy. My son even had a slightly wonky smile and he couldn't read expressions. As I was his main carer, he just copied me. Yet to him, I was his mummy, and even growing up, he was never fazed by my facial palsy. He loved me just because of who I was. Life rolled on. Job interviews were a disaster. I felt they took one look at me and had already decided I wasn't right. People thought I was making this up, but you just know. I had a couple of jobs, but nothing fulfilling. I was getting unknowingly more and more depressed and resentful of the way I looked. I had just met my future husband Martin and I couldn't believe how lucky I was, but not even meeting my soulmate could pull me out of this. It was once again panic. How could someone like him want to be with me? What would his family think of me, and more importantly, what would his daughter think of him being with someone with facial palsy? But it didn't matter how many times he told me how beautiful I was or how much he loved me. All I could think was, I don't deserve you. I also felt so lucky that my stepdaughter loved me for me and she didn't treat me any different. The way I was feeling, I hit an all-time low and I was finally referred for counselling. When I got to the top of the list, funding in my area was cut. My new doctor was brilliant. And even though she didn't know much about facial palsy, she did all she could to help. After receiving funding, I was sent to a maxillofacial clinic. They couldn't help me, but they knew someone that possibly could. And from then on, things got better and better. This is where Facial Palsy UK came into my life. I attended the first brainstorming meeting before the charity officially launched. It was a success, and for the first time in my life, I was looking forward to the future. Myself and my husband were invited to be part of the Community Advisory Board for Facial Palsy UK. It felt like such a privilege to be part of this, with people wanting to hear mine and my partner's experiences and feelings all about facial palsy. I was 34 years old, and it was at this first meeting I met someone like me, someone else that was born with facial palsy, and it was a truly overwhelming experience after all these years of being and feeling alone. While attending one of the charity support groups, I was given advice and tips on interview techniques to give me more confidence for a promotion I was going for. And even though I was so nervous, I remembered everything I was told, and I did it. I got the promotion. Not only did I get the promotion, I was given the opportunity to go on a year course, travelling to different places in Europe with people I'd never met. This was something I could have never done before, mostly because of no confidence and the fear of meeting new people and having to communicate. To graduate, part of it was to give a presentation. All I could think about was I can't stand on that side of the stage because people will see my facial palsy. I got myself so worked up and in a mess, a bit like today, but I pushed myself and I did it. I now have the desire to push further and achieve more by not hiding away, by building my confidence and not letting what I look like hold me back. I have had the opportunity to volunteer at the Family Fun Days, which has been an amazing experience for me. To see families be able to talk about their own experiences, share information, and the kids to know that they are not alone is something I wish I had when I was growing up. I have people to talk to, people that understand me, and people that can relate to what I'm saying, and to know that I'm not wrong for feeling the way I do. I have had help dealing with my depression. This is what Facial Palsy UK has helped me achieve in such a short time. Without this charity, without the support groups, the information that I've been given and the support from everybody involved with Facial Palsy UK, whether it be on a web page, social media, support groups or friends I have made, I honestly don't know where I would be. Just because you were born with facial palsy, it doesn't make you accept it any easier. I still have a lot of bad days and things to overcome, but those days are not as bad as they were. This is my facial palsy face, and this is a face that felt so alone. This is a face I was embarrassed and ashamed of. This was a face that had no confidence. This is one of the faces that Facial Palsy UK supports with all the above issues and much, much more. I would just like to say to all the children growing up with facial palsy, it can seem hard at times. Take every bit of support that is offered to you. Remember, every dream you have is achievable and that everything is going to be okay. Fears and worries will always be there whether you have FP or not. If this charity had been around when I was growing up, I know my story would have been so different. One thing is for sure, and that is you will never be alone. Thank you.